The reason why musicians speak in tongues is a form of communication. It's a double entendre. It's a way to say what you want to say without saying anything at all. I say the Bible's written that way, written in parables, written in code, written in confusing language. And that's how I figured out what musicians were singing about, is because I started seeing the same thing in lyrics that I started seeing in the Bible. It's this concept of symbology. It's a concept of riddles. Jesus taught in parables, and he taught in parables for protection, so people could be protected. The reason why they're protected is because enough time has to pass so that everything gets infiltrated. Enough time for, let's say, musicians to get on the stage and get behind the microphone and deliver enough messaging so you can understand it. I write extensively about this in my book, Synapse. So this is just an introduction to the idea. One of the biggest things that have to be overcome is this concept of filthy language. You hear F-bombs left and right in music, right? It turns out that's on purpose. It's the idea of being effed because you're introduced to a concept that you're not supposed to be aware of, and then all of a sudden, like in the twinkle of an eye, like the Apostle Paul, in the twinkle of an eye, the scales fall from your eyes and you can see clearly. That's the idea of getting effed. So you're running around like a fool, accusing everybody, and then all of a sudden you're awakened to reality, and now you're the biggest advocate, and you speak in riddles, like Paul said in 1 Corinthians 1:17. So you don't void the value of the cross. So the Apostle Paul followed this exact same template. He was running around. He was trained as a Pharisee. He was trained to be this guy that stoned people, that killed people, and he voted against these people until Jesus came along and opened his eyes. He went to Straight Street. He had his eyes open, and then all of a sudden, from that point forward, he preached, and he was an apostle, which is strange because an apostle divides and a preacher brings together. So he's effectively speaking out of two sides of his mouth. That's the idea of parables. That's the idea of speaking in tongues. Musicians do the same thing. So the F-bomb, I used to say the F-bomb so much that my wife gave me it's actually kind of funny. And then she gave me the a-hole too, because it's funny. The point is, profanity was sort of part of my life until my daughter said that they were embarrassed by it. And then all of a sudden, somehow, I just managed to work it out of my vocabulary and very rarely use profanity anymore. But musicians use profanity all the time. The thing is, they're saying something different with it. They're not saying what you think. The filthy language that the Bible talks about, that's not the filthy language of modern day profanity. Filthy language in the Bible is the idea of defiling yourself or becoming wicked out, that type of thing. What comes out of your mouth can defile you. What goes in doesn't defile you. That's the concept of food. But musicians have a way to sort of write things and say things in a poetic form that they're saying something other than what they're saying. Those are parables. That's tongues. Those are riddles. Psalm 49:4 says the psalmists, the Sons of Korah, will propound a riddle on the harp. What that means is psalmists are the ones who are delivering the message in riddles to the rest of us, the Sons of Korah. So why? Why? So God's message can continually be delivered, waiting for the day for the church to wake up and recognize the world around us is much bigger than the church itself. 31% of human population claim to be Christians. And if the Christian philosophy that you have to claim Christ in this modern temporal world in order to be saved, if that's really the way things work, God utterly failed. What father would say to almost 70% of his children, "You're not good enough, see you later"? No, come on. God didn't die on the cross for that to happen. God's bigger than that. God's going to save us all. So musicians are trying to convey this particular message. It's a deep-seated secret, but it's this concept of big picture. You have Adam, who is put into a stupor. He falls asleep, and Eve is pulled away from him and created into another being. So Eve, the rib, is like a treasure chest. If you look at the meaning of the word that's translated to rib, it means long side of an ark or ark door, side room, that kind of concept. But think of that as the treasure chest that is shut or dammed closed. The river can't get out. Jesus was hung on the cross, and he was speared inside, which is the chest, and the water flows out, the blood flows out, the treasure of the bloodline flows out. Think of the trees of knowledge and life. You have knowledge, which is water, and you have blood, which is life. Those are the trees that flowed out of Jesus at the time when he was crucified on the cross. This biblical backstory is all throughout music, where you have this longing for the other half. You have this desire to see the other half, and you can't go to sleep, and you're tired and things like that. That's like the disciples in Gethsemane, where they can't fall asleep. And Jesus, when they did fall asleep, Jesus would come back and kick them awake. Hey, wake up, wake up, wake up. He did that 3 different times. And the idea behind that is you have to be awake and experience the world around, but you can't look back into your rearview mirror. You can't look behind you, because you've got to be in the present now and looking forward, because that's the way things work. When you're older, you are led around by your hand, according to John 21:18. You're led around by your hand, going places that you don't want to go. And that's the idea of 1 Corinthians 15:46-48, where one person, like Adam, has 2 bodies, which is the earthly and the heavenly. So you're divided into 2, according to the way that setup works. And I encourage you to go back and read 1 Corinthians 15 to understand more of the context. But it's Adam and Eve as one person, split apart, burning in desire for one another. They want the other half, they just don't know how to get there, because that flaming sword of division is between them. That's the Bible. That's the Word of God that's dividing us. We can't track all of it, because we don't even know that it's locked. We don't know that that is a locked document, a locked scroll. It has to be, the seals have to be broken for us to be able to get it and understand. Musicians are trying to perpetuate this and trying to deliver a message, but because of the messianic secret and that curse of silence, they can't say what they want to say. They have to be found instead. And that's the point of this project, is finding the lost embers, telling those who are fallen and cut off and cast out that it's time to come home, because God's ready for them to come home.